Announced back in 2018 and originally scheduled to release in 2019, Digimon Survive has gone through a series of delays, but now the game has finally shipped. The tactical RPG parts of this game are what originally caught my eye and had me start following it when it was announced. I would consider myself a fan of the Digimon series, as growing up I would watch parts of the first 3 animes, and throughout my life I've gone back and checked out some of the other animes and video games. On top of this, tactical RPG games like Fire Emblem and XCOM are some of my favorite of all time. For me, this mashup seemed like a perfect fit, so I was continually sad when they kept pushing this game. This is the first video game impression I'm doing here at the Steel Lodge, and I definitely wanted to focus on this game in particular as my first one. I've been waiting for the game for quite a while, and now that it finally launched, it launched right next to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is obviously a massive launch for Nintendo. That game has a pretty big fan base. My girlfriend has just been playing it nonstop since it launched, and it's sure to just crush the sales of this one, and all the gaming websites are going to talk about that game and not this one. Now, as far as the impressions for this game go, I will break this video down into 3 major sections. First, I'll be covering the presentation, and then the gameplay, and finally the story, and in the end, I'll wrap it all up and give you the conclusion of who should play this game and if you should pick it up. Let's jump right into it. Immediately, Digimon Survive starts strong with a darker vibe than series veterans might be used to. This title leans into horror and actually has some genuinely terrifying imagery. For a visual novel, this game gives off a very high production value, with many lines being fully voiced and high quality character art, lighting, and backdrops that work well together to forge something that's greater than the sum of its parts. The art on display here is quite beautiful, and the character designs are solid overall. The light from the surrounding areas affects the characters on display and helps them feel more dynamic and integrated with the scenery. All this is very important, as you'll be spending the majority of your time here in the visual novel side of things, as opposed to the tactical combat. In the first 2 chapters of the game, the majority of the time has been spent in thickly wooded forests, ancient shrines, and a skull ground. I've enjoyed the environments I've been in so far, and in some of these scenes, your character will actually move through the environment, and some of the geometry in there will actually move around with you. For the tactical combat mode, the perspective shifts to a more traditional isometric view, allowing you to rotate the camera. Sprites here will also rotate depending on the camera's direction, which is a nice touch. In this view, many characters in Digimon take on a more chibi look than what you would see in other parts of the game. Personally, I don't mind this at all, and all the Digimon I've encountered on the battlefield so far look great and have nice artwork. As far as animations on the battlefield go, I haven't seen a ton of them at this point, but the ones I have seen so far are good. As far as the audio presentation goes, the game has had a very enjoyable soundtrack so far, with several songs that have been a treat to listen to. Also, as I previously mentioned, many of the lines in the game have voice acting that sounds just like we would hear right out of an anime. One thing to keep in mind is this game does not have an English audio track. This doesn't bother me at all, as I usually watch anime with subs, but this might be a deal breaker for some of you. So far, I would describe the UI in the game as very clean. All the elements are easy to read and presented in a way that's easy to understand. This clean UI helps it remain unobtrusive and lets you focus on other parts of the game, which are beautiful. Digimon Survive has an extremely strong presentation for a visual novel and also as a turn-based tactical game. Overall, this is one of the strongest parts of this game. I want to make it clear that a large amount of your time in this game will be spent on the visual novel side of things, around 70% of it actually. To be honest, this is a bit more than I was initially expecting, but as I've played the game more and more, it's grown on me, and there are parts of the visual novel sections that do have more interactability than others. On the visual novel side, a good amount of the game just takes place as dialogue between characters or with events happening in the world. For these sections, generally long dialogue sequences are voice acted, while the more interactive bits just come up as text on the screen. During these dialogue sequences, you will occasionally be presented with different options. In many instances, you will have 3 options to pick from. During these bits, if you move your joystick and hover over the text for the paths, it'll turn different colors and correspond to the different paths you can take in the game. This is called the karma system, and so far, what I've seen, the left-hand side is usually the moral choice, the top is the wrathful choice, and the right-hand side will be the harmony choice. Typically so far, I've been doing more harmony options, as that is more reliant on communications, and I've just found myself leaning towards those dialogue options more often. Now, these choices also do have other gameplay effects. They will change the outcome of the story, and there's actually pretty significant changes later on in the game. The first 8 chapters of the game will play out pretty similarly regardless of your choices, but the next 4 chapters will branch significantly depending on the choices you've made throughout the game. These karma paths will also give you different bonuses in combat. For me, on the karma route, I have mostly been getting healing bonuses and SP bonuses in battle for my allies when I'm fighting enemies. Additionally, when you're recruiting new Digimon, depending on your karma affinities, it will help you recruit different types. There's 3 different types of Digimon generally, and they will align to the different karma paths. The interactable portions of the visual novel don't stop there. During dialogue sequences, you may choose what character you can talk to, and picking a specific character over another may give them affinity points, which will help them out in the long run. The most interactive part of the visual novel is during the exploration parts of the game. During exploration, you're given a cursor to look around the environment for interactables such as Digimon, character, or different environmental objects. You can also pull out your smartphone and use its camera to search for hidden items or encounters. During these exploration portions, you can go to different areas of the map, and it makes it very clear to you where to go to progress the story, but I always found it enjoyable to go search around in different areas, looking for hidden items and interactions. Once you get your Digimon party members, you're also free to explore these areas and do free battles in order to level up your Digimon or add new ones to your party. Now, on the combat side of things, this is a pretty straightforward tactical turn-based RPG system, but I've enjoyed my time with it so far. All the encounters I've had have had simple completion objectives, that being defeat all the enemies. Some players may have mixed feelings on this because a lot of people in these kinds of games enjoy more complex objectives, but I haven't played through a ton of combat scenarios, so that might change over time. In combat, turn order is decided by a Digimon's speed. This works fine, but a lot of tactical RPG players might be used to moving your whole team at once and then having your enemy go. I find turn order in that way to work a little bit better if you're trying to synergize your whole team together, but the system here works just fine. Once it's a Digimon's turn, their move stat determines how far they can move. As far as attacks go, all my Digimon have had a simple attack that is free to use or a special attack that uses SP, which you can think of as the mana system in this game. There's been a pretty good variety of attacks for my team so far, with some of them being ranged fireball attacks, a heal, or a melee attack that pushes enemies away. I'm hoping the attack pool on my Digimon expands as I progress further in the game, because 2 abilities is not a ton. Another option you can take in battle is the ability to talk to different party members on your team who can provide you with different temporary stat buffs. You're able to talk to enemy Digimon also, but I'll dive into that more later. So one system that people really like about Digimon games and the franchise in general is the ability to digivolve your Digimon. And unlike Pokemon, a lot of these Digimon can digivolve into different forms from their initial one. So for your main character's Digimon, you can spend SP to evolve them in combat. This will provide them a number of stat bonuses and new moves to use. For other Digimon that you acquire in battle, when you evolve them, they will permanently stay evolved. I haven't progressed far enough in the game yet to acquire the resources necessary to do this evolution, but the Digimon I've acquired through battle so far do have a good number of evolutions they can have. I'm really looking forward to evolving my party members and getting new Digimon and evolving them as well. There are many stages of Digi-evolution, and most of them are obscure to the player, so when you do find out what they are, it'll be a treat for you. As far as collecting Digimon goes, there's around 114 to get, which includes Guilmon, the bonus for getting the game early. Honestly, this isn't a tremendous amount as there's over 1,000 Digimon in total, and games on the DS even have over 400. That being said, as long as there's some fan favorites and a good variety, I think that'll be enough. Honestly, in Digimon, there's a lot of recolors of pre-existing Digimon, so as long as I steer clear from that, I think we'll be okay here. In order to add new Digimon to your party, you talk to enemies on the battlefield. Once you've engaged them in conversation, you need to try to satisfy their line of questioning, for a chance to recruit them or get an item from them. If you played Persona or Shin Megami Tensei games before, this system should sound very familiar to you. And as I previously mentioned, depending on your affinity in the karma system, it'll affect your ability to get certain kinds of Digimon. Now, one other thing I want to mention about the combat is this game is very front-loaded with the visual novel side of things. You'll jump into a early combat tutorial extremely early on, but after that, in the prologue, it's pretty thin pickings. Later, when you get to Chapter 1, in the later section of Chapter 1, there's a lot more combat that happens and free battle opens up to you. It'll vary from player to player for how much time you spend to get to the point where you get your first Digi-evolution and the combat system opens up a bit more, but for me, it was a bit over 2 hours of playtime. This is the area of the game I have the least to say about so far. I've only spent a few hours with the game so far, but at the very beginning of the game, a mystery is set up that I'm sure will unravel as we continue on through the game. There's a pretty large cast of characters here, and I've enjoyed most of them, although they come off as a bit tropey. At this point, the most annoying character for me is Rio. A lot of the time I've spent with him, he's just been whining or crying, and has been very afraid of essentially everything that's going on. That being said, this horror survival scenario is definitely a mix-up for the franchise, and it's really good at keeping players and characters on their toes while they wander around, because you never know what is lying around the next corner. As a visual novel with 12 chapters and a large cast, I'm sure my bond to the other characters will grow as more intriguing story situations come up, and as we unravel what exactly happened at the beginning of the game. I'm looking forward to diving into this one more, and the fact that there are different outcomes depending on your choices really gives the game some replay value and makes you ponder what the long-term repercussions of your decisions might be. In conclusion, I've enjoyed my time with Digimon Survive so far. I think the presentation of the game is the strongest aspect of it. The visual novel looks really good, all the art there is beautiful, and the tactical RPG sections also look nice and play well too. Now, I mostly enjoy playing this game before I go to sleep. I kind of view it as a manga or an anime that has some combat woven throughout it. I have to admit, though, that this is a pretty niche game. Visual novels are definitely not for everybody, and neither are tactical turn-based RPG games. Digimon fans are sure to like this one. It's something completely different in terms of a game, with tone and gameplay being something very different for the franchise. Check this one out if you like anime, manga, or want something really slow-paced with an interesting setup. With all that being said, guys, I'm just getting over COVID now. Hopefully in a day or two, I'll be back up to full speed. But the whole time I've been playing this game and editing this video, I've been pretty sick. So I'm happy to get it out to you guys. And this is the first impression video I've done for a game, but I hope you like it. And that's about all. Have a good one.